Man, I swear to you with complete solemnity, I'm going to have to move away from this state. It must be 50 degrees and damp out there today. I'm freezing. Frigid, frigid time. Winter time in Washington, the coldest state in the Union. I used to live in Minnesota, where it got cold. But it's a dry cold. You don't know it's cold. Humidity is really low out here in Washington. Overall humidity. But it's cold and wet out there. Man, when it gets down below 50 out here, and you know what? I'm lying. I hate the cold. I hate the Midwest. I'm happy to be out here where it's 50 and I can walk down to the shop and whine about the cold. So, last segment, last time we were here, I opened up talking about barrel joint motion. What we're talking about here, I'll go over here and grab a barrel. This joint, let me get up here in the camera. This abutting surface right here is of such a size that if you torque an action to 150 pounds, it will tend to deform that shoulder. Now, the shank I'm talking about, I'm going to try to see if we can get a reading here on this. Hard to read, but that's reading inch 2.5. This is another Krieger blank. But a lot of them, like I just bought a bunch of Bart lines. 13.5, 13.75, 14 twist, a couple of 8s. And I bought them off the shelf from Bug Hole or somebody, whoever had them. Inch 2 shanks. Now, an 8-inch twist, 6x47, and an inch 2 shank has some problems, which is why you see I'm playing around with something right now. But first of all, let me explain some of the things that go on when a rifle is fired. The rifle firing is not a benign event. It's a lot more... Sorry about this. I was told a long time ago that the quickest and easiest way to become a millionaire gunsmith is to start with 2 million. I now know what that means. Where I'm going with this, I'm not veering off on a wild rabbit trail. I fund this stuff that I do with an actual business. So I'm working every day all the time. I've got phones sitting here, I've got to answer phone calls, I'll cut them off. But the point is I can't just shut them off. I'm not a independently wealthy guy that can come on here and just devote all of my time to you as much as I'd like to do that. So I'm working my job plus this. So we're going to go back to what happens when the firearm goes off. We all know that the firing pin drops, taps on the primer, boom, and there's a recoil impulse. The bullet goes that way, the gun goes this way. Newton's laws of motion state that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. The expansion is contained, so that only leaves 2 areas of motion, the bullet going one direction, the rifle coming the other direction. And that's called the recoil impulse. And that equation balances every time. Any mathematician, any ballistician, anybody who runs the numbers on this understands that that equation balances. Bullet going that way at x velocity equates to rifle going this way at x velocity based on its mass. Mass of the bullet, but there's more to it than that. It's not just an escape. What actually happens, I'm going to use this gun to illustrate because I think it's short enough to fit in the frame. Interesting subject here, interesting gun here. A number of years ago, I was talking to Jim Borden. Jim Borden is somebody, I hate to drop a name like that, but he did my work for a long time until I got a lathe and started doing all this weird, goofy stuff that I do now. But he builds arguably the most accurate guns on the planet. A bench rest, this is not a bench rest gun. This is something I put together because I didn't know what else to do. A number of years ago, I was talking with Jim and I said, what have you got in your used inventory? And he said, well, the only thing I have right now in the used is a varmint gun that I built for a guy. I kind of bench rested the Remington Action. I put together a nice Remington Action and we made a varmint cartridge and we stuck it in an A5 stock. I said, I'll take it. He sends it out. He said, it's got a 243 Ackley improved barrel on it, I think. And it's in an A5 stock with a big rail down the bottom for something. Well, I shot it. I brought it out on the varmint patch and it worked good and I pretty much burned that barrel up. But long story short, I've got this Bordenized Action. It's got these cool rings on here. Borden went through and he spent a bunch of money on this Remington Action. Now, unfortunately, when you spend a bunch of money on a Remington Action, you end up with a Remington Action, which is worth what you paid for it. It's worth crap. I think he had epoxied a plate into the bottom, turned it into a single shot. I don't remember. The point is, the Action. So I had Jim. I sent out my reamer. This is 25 years ago, before there was a 6.5 Lapua case, before there was 308 Palma. I had done something called, at first I called it my 300 Ichabod, or 308 Ichabod, because it had a really long neck. I took a 308 case, and I walked up to my grinder with an RCBS die, and I ground a bunch off the bottom, a couple hundred thou. And I shoved the shoulder back or pushed the case up through the die, and I came up with a cartridge that's, I could call a 308 minus 200. Don't know that it's 200, it's just something. And then I trimmed that 308 case down and I made something called an HBR cartridge. At that time in my life, up here in Gig Harbor, Washington, there was a thriving hunter bench rest community. And I've just setting up guns for different competitions for when my family allows me to get out and about and start attending competitions. So this is my iteration of an HBR cartridge. I shortened a 308 case down until it achieved the capacity, the water capacity, the grains of HTO such that it equals, I think it's 45 grains, and I think it's the same as a 3030 cartridge. I think this was based on the idea that this competition, which is a score competition, you shoot a case that produces, and this comes back to what I'm finding out. This is called recoil impulse, or in pistols, they actually measure recoil energy, and you go up to the line with a 32 Super something or another pistol, and as I understand it, it has to make something called a power factor, because it has to produce enough recoil to disrupt the shooter. So you go to the line and your ammo is rated by power factor. Now I'm talking way above my pay grade here. Understand, I don't really know where. I've never shot pistol, I've never shot IPSC, I've never shot any of this stuff. So I'm stepping out of line, but the point I'm trying to make is that power factor is a thing. The amount of power that a cartridge makes is reflected in recoil, on how fast it pushes the bullet and the size of the bullet. But it doesn't matter if you're shooting a 6.5 PRC, which is a currently wildly overbore, pick the 404 Jeffrey case, which is the size of a Volkswagen bus. You neck it down to 6.5 caliber. You got this great big wad of powder, and you're pushing this little bitty bullet down. But the equation balances. Because it's so overbore, you burn a lot in heat and you waste a lot in expansion and whatever, but long story short, it pushes that little 6.5 bullet wicked fast. So, even though it's a 6.5 gun, it produces the energy, let's call it power factor, of a 404 Jeffrey, or a 300 Remington Ultra Mag. See, it's funny because when I was a kid, I could tell you a lot of stories about the 300 Winchester Magnum. People loved it, people hated it. The bottom line is the 300 Winchester Magnum, back when it came out, produced a power factor so heinous that normal human beings on this planet could not shoot it effectively. What that means is the 300 Win Mag was set up for a 220 grain-ish bullet. Elk hunting, big game hunting. Big game starts with, oh man, I better not even go there because, I mean, deer are called big game, but you can knock a deer over with a stick. But then you get into some Sonora whitetails and you find out they're tougher than elk. So big game are game that are hard to knock down. The African Plains game are definitely considered to be big game, and they're very hard to knock down. So this power factor thing and bullet performance has been a thing for years and years. So the 300 Win Mag comes out. People go out and buy a few boxes of 220s, and they take it out and shoot it, and it hurts them. It hurts them bad. They're crying like wee babies. They hate this gun, but they're men. Well, they're males. They have a... Anyway, most of them in that time, this is 60s, 70s, people found it harder to cry. People found, well, they could cry for effect, but people found it harder to admit that this thing's hurting me. So the 300 Win Mag got a lot of detractors, and what happened is a lot of people got to the point where they found out that to shoot it they had to use 150 grain bullets. So it became, guys are walking around the woods shooting a 300 Winchester Magnum with a 150 grain lead bullet in it, jacketed lead bullet, which means it's going to hit the side of a big old hairy mud covered elk and just going to hurt it, blow a patch of hide off the near side. So suffice it to say that it got a lot of bad press. Deservedly, because rednecks don't know what they're doing, making bad decisions. But where I'm going with this is power factor. So I designed this hunter cartridge, and I did a great job. I hit my numbers on the nut. In fact, I did such a great job that later when the 308 Palma case, well, no, I'm getting my cart before my horse here. I'd been begging and pleading and crying to the universe at large for a small primer pocket, small flash hole case, bigger than the BR case. People had been making something called the Dasher, which is an abortion, but it's the 22 Dasher was brilliant, by the way. 22 Dasher is a wonderful thing. But the 6 Dasher is taking a 6 BR case and lengthening it. Now some of you are going to say, why are you talking about? Well, the reason is they're all based on the 308 case. Way back in the day, and I got boxes of it laying here, but I'm too disjointed. Remington came up with something called the 308 basic case. It's a full-length case, not even necked, and you can neck it to whatever you want. You can make a 243, you could make a 6x47 Lapua, you could make a 6BR. That's where the original BR came from, it's from the basic case. So this case right here makes anything from 243 to, you know, the current Wunderkind, which you just shoot in the air and the bullet comes down and kills whatever it is that you want by pure magic a quarter acre away. The 6.5 Creedmoor. Much as I hate to say those words out loud, the Creedmoor is a beautiful, wonderful, perfectly balanced, excellent, most excellent cartridge. But it's like the movie Titanic. It was hyped up so much that by the time it came out, people are like, well, I guess, I mean, it was a good movie, but the Creedmoor gets so much press, but it all comes back to power factor. I could take this case right here, squeeze the neck down, put a 6.5 bullet, and it would be a 6.5 Creedmoor. They're all based on the 308 case. There's something here called the bolt face. This happens to be what I commonly call a 473 bolt face, which is shared by 270, 35 Wayland, 30-06, 308, 243. There's a whole slew of cases that are based on only 2 basic cases, the 308 base case and the 30-06 base case. Both have the 473 bolt head. This just happens to be something that I put together, and then the game died. The people shooting it stopped. Well, there's more to it than that. It was actually kind of a tragic thing. Someone got sick. HBR around here became a non-thing. So long story short, I'm stuck here with this totally accurized Remington 700, which is no good off the bags for bench shooting if you're trying to repeat for group, because it disrupts the bags. Now I'm thinking in my head bone, I bet I can use this thing for a group gun because for a score gun, because with a score gun, you fly from target to target. Your bags are kind of disrupting all the time anyway. So I took this action and I had Jim chamber for me. This is a heart, and I called it at that time 30 by 47L. Al Matson variant. Jim Borden put this barrel on this action, and I still hated the A5 stock. Well, somewhere or another I'd fallen across this particular stock, which is an on-shoots, but I liked the way it looked and I liked the way it felt. Now I had to do some serious modification on here. You're going to notice that this whole top had to be carved out because the action does not fit in this stock. I had to do a bunch of mods down here on the bottom. Nothing fits correctly, but it's a cute little thing, and it was something to do with this Borden action. So I don't know why I digressed on that, just because it's the way I do stuff. So I took this action has been in a bunch of different stocks. I ended up with it in this stock, and I brought it in here because the whole package is really short. It fits in the frame. And I want to show you, not only is there a tremendous impulse right here, and in this case I'm going to call it a 308 sized impulse. Boom! It tries to blow the bolt out the back, but it's held in place. It tries to blow the barrel off, but it's held in place by this joint. It pushes the bullet out the barrel. But this is not a benign action, and that's where I'm going. Rifle Accuracy Facts started quantifying these things, and there's been a lot of work since. From the instant that you pull the trigger, there's an impulse generated as the hammer or the striker starts to pick up velocity. That sets a vibration pattern going in here. Furthermore, once that firing pin bottoms out, once it hits the firing pin, hits the primer, that action again is not benign. It's like a bulldozer plowing through the side of a building. This 23 to 28 pounds smashes on the back of that cup and slowly drives its way in, disrupting the anvil, starting a primary explosion. That is almost a primary explosive, the stiffnates that are used in a primer, which then injects hot gases and particles into the powder charge, and the powder charge then starts to burn. This all takes a lot of time. This is eons of time. From the very first impulse of the striker being released and then hitting, we've got a set of vibrations running through this gun. Now, the firing pin slams into the back of the primer, drives its way in, crunch, 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 crunch. It ignites, goes into the powder, that starts the whole thing. Now this thing starts to hump up. As the bullet, as that pressure builds and that bullet starts to go, you get that separation moment right here, and this gun starts to hump up. It's like you laid a water hose down and hit it with the water, it goes ping. Well, that all starts right here. The gun starts to go back, and this, as it's trying to rip up and it's going out the barrel, it humps this barrel and it produces a bunch of more vibrations in this barrel. By the time that bullet exits, the impulse on this thing is as though you had taken this gun and you're holding it against your shoulder or on a set of bags or whatever, and Sammy Sosa took a swing, BAM! And smacked this muzzle. This brings us into even more. So here we've got this situation. Remember what I said earlier about tuning forks? I was going to bring down a great big tuning fork, and I was going to go, whoa, 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 and it was going to be so impressive, but unfortunately, I decided not to do that. This is an actual tuning fork, A440, but it's not very loud. Don't know that you can hear anything at all. But it shows, because it's marked A440 and it rings A440 and it is an A440 fork, A440 means something. It's 440 hertz. It's a vibration pattern. It all comes back to the gun. This thing vibrates consistently. That's why it's called a tuning fork. The reason it vibrates consistently is because it's hooked together. The whole thing is a solid bar with another bar welded to it, and it rings consistently at 440 hertz. If this were the barrel of the gun and this were the stock of the gun and you were to go bang, this piece and this piece would work together in harmony and you would get a consistent vibration pattern. And now that we have the inner tube available to us, you can go on and look at what this gun looks like. You got a big old scope sitting up here. There's cheap cameras out there now. People are filming stuff. You can go watch this gun vibrate. This barrel go up and down. The scope almost touched the barrel. You can watch all the movements. It's a very violent set of motions. And the end is bam. It's trying to tear the whole assembly right out of the stock. Pillar bedding, in everyone's mind, is about putting some aluminum pillars in so you don't compress the stock. Well, that's just bogus. That has nothing. No, it's to transfer solidly down into the bottom. It's to transfer solidly down through here, and so that the upward force of the thing trying to rip out. Anyway, we're going to get into all of this. We're running out of time on this segment. But this gave me a chance to kind of show you, get you primed up for the stuff that we're going to work on here over the course of the next however long we work on this, might be years.